Okay. All right, I believe we are now live.
Excellent.
This is the first time we're going live from a Zoom webinar, so learning new technology. I'm just going to wait to get confirmation that we are actually live first. Looks like we have 9 people viewing us. So I'm going to go ahead and get us started, and then we'll get into the Facebook Live event. So welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us on this Facebook Live event. My name is Jack Wellman. I am Field Director for Representative Rick Larson and the campaign here. I want to encourage everyone to leave a comment and questions in the Facebook Live comment section. And later in the event, we will get to as many questions as we're able to. So thanks for joining us, and thanks for joining us, Representative Rick Larson and State Party Chair of the Washington Democrats, Tina Podlodowski. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rick to get us started.
Thanks, Jack. And I want to thank Party Chair Tina Podlodowski for joining us tonight for this Facebook Live event. It's good to see you, Tina, and I've just got some opening comments, and I've got some questions for you. I hope you're ready to answer a few questions.
Absolutely.
Excellent. So the first thing I want to just address tonight for everyone is the murder of George Floyd and the response, the community's response, which largely has been focused on nonviolent demonstration in order to highlight the real still need in this country to address systemic racism. And we need to continue to support those nonviolent demonstrators and nonviolent protesters who are protesting a very, very racist system that has resulted in years of lack of economic opportunity, lack of educational access, lack of access to good health care. And that's the systemic side of things. But today, and over the last couple of days, I've been meeting with community leaders and congressional leaders to develop some ideas that we hope in Congress, that in the House of Representatives, that the House Democrats will put together in one piece of legislation and move forward to address some broader, broader issues. So, for instance, a couple of issues that we're looking into is, the next step in criminal justice reform. We've looked at and passed the First Steps Act a few years ago. We need now to move beyond that to the next step of criminal justice reform. We need to consider the lack of a database, the lack of a national database on the use of force by police officers. Some police departments voluntarily report use of force incidents, like the City of Everett Police Department, but most police departments do not have a policy of reporting under this voluntary system. So we need to make that use of force data of reporting mandatory, so we can do a better job of detecting patterns in police use of force. We need to have a stronger, more robust decertified officer database, so we know about these officers who are moving from department to department for reasons of because of they're bad cops. And unfortunately, there are some bad cops, and most of our police officers and deputy sheriffs are doing a wonderful job, a great job. It's just enough of them are not. And we need to know who those folks are. And we need to have accountability and oversight as well. And I'm hoping to put some legislation together as a broader piece of legislation to maybe give some incentives to local police departments and jurisdictions to create oversight and accountability mechanisms over the law enforcement agencies, your local law enforcement agencies. So those are some of the things that I'm trying to do, that Democrats around the country are looking at doing as well. And certainly we welcome your input as we move further on and trying to address these issues. I want to just turn now to the election, because that is still happening. And this fall, when I'm running against a Republican, I'm going to need as much help as I can get. And I will tell you, a lot of Democrats are going to need as much help as we can get. I always say you can't rely on the president to turn out our base. We have to rely on ourselves to turn out our base. And I think in the 2nd Congressional District, we should have good turnout. I expect that it'll be me versus a Republican this fall. And we've got legislative districts within my district that are high, that are targets as well, like the 10th Legislative District, the 42nd Legislative District. There's just 2 examples of districts that we need to maintain. We have people who've been appointed in the 40th and the 38th that we need to continue to support as well. And so I feel pretty good about the election, but we are doing a kickoff this week of our phone banks. We'll have 3 phone banks this week. I think on Wednesday, Thursday, and Saturday. And if you want to join our virtual phone bank, you can email Jack, who you met at the beginning here. And Jack is at jack@ricklarson.org. That's jack@ricklarson.org. I'd like you to join this campaign. There have been several Democratic Party legislative district parties that have endorsed me already. There's a few more. I'm doing some interviews this weekend for a few more as well. We are building a strong grassroots campaign with over 60 local elected leaders who've already endorsed my campaign as well. And the endorsement of the National Education Association, the educators in the district and the state who have endorsed me, Laborers International from the unions, the Alliance for Gun Responsibility, Sierra Club, the National Sierra Club and the Washington State chapter of the Sierra Club have endorsed. NARAL and Planned Parenthood, because of a 100% pro-choice record, have endorsed. The End Citizens United Action Fund has endorsed. The Young Democrats of Washington, the Washington Stonewall Democrats have endorsed, and so many others. And I'd like you to join my campaign and help out so we can continue this momentum that is clear and clearly headed towards a win in November with your help. So we need to be ready to counter what the Republicans are going to put up this fall with a strong Democratic grassroots campaign, which I always do, no matter what the competition is like, and I'm going to continue to do it. And like I said, we're kicking off phone banks later this week. It's an honor to be able to represent this district in Washington, D.C. and work on all your behalf. We've got a lot of issues trying to make sure there's economic opportunity for middle-class families, that we protect the right to vote, and not just the right to vote, but the integrity of your vote, to make sure that the vote that is counted is the vote that you cast. We need to fight climate change and protect the environment. We've got issues with training the next generation workforce so they're ready to be competitive in a very competitive global economy. There are a lot of things that we need to work on, and only Democrats are going to be able to put forward the agenda and put forward the legislation to make all these things happen. So I hope I can have your help, and I know the state party needs your help around the state as well. And that's why I've asked Tina Podlodowski, the state party chair, to be here with us tonight. And I want to turn it over to Tina, but I'm going to warn you, Tina, I've got some questions for you when you're done. So be ready for that. And I'll turn it over to Tina, and then I'll ask her a few questions, and then we'll go back to Jack for some more questions. So with that, Tina Podlodowski, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Rick. And I appreciate the opportunity to be here talking about the work that we're doing around the state of Washington. Obviously, these are unprecedented times. It's not just that America is crying out for justice in the wake of the murder of George Floyd, but also that we are operating under a pandemic as well. And all of that has put us into unprecedented campaign times. It's true, if you take a look at this from a national perspective, that I do believe the Republican Party nationally is trying very, very hard to do everything they can to suppress the vote and ensure that people cannot vote across the country. Here in Washington State, thanks to Democrats in the state legislature, thanks to people like you, Rick, advocating for a strong vote by mail system, we've been able to go ahead and put together one of the best vote by mail systems in the country, with automatic voter registration, same day registration, pre-registration, as well as postage paid ballots. But none of that matters if we can't turn out people to put their ballot into either a drop box or the mailbox and make sure that they work and make sure that they win. So how do you do that under a time of a pandemic? How do you do that when the nation is in crisis? Well, we keep doing our work every day, and it's about talking to people, listening to people, and caring about what their issues are and how we're realizing those in our Democratic Party. So we started phone banking a little bit early. Phone banking is going to be the #1 way, I think, for folks to be able to connect over this process. But it's astounding. Generally, phone banks have historically connected to people at a rate of 6 to 8%. And that's very low. So it's a technique where you're making a lot of calls, but not necessarily making a lot of connections. We as a state party have been using predictive dialers and other pieces of technology. And on any given night, we're seeing that our connect rate is anywhere from 20 to 65%.
Wow.
And it's amazing. And it's like so much of the work that you're doing in these community meetings, we're leading with how can I help? Tell me what's happening for you around all of these different things. So I think that that's been really, really important. Everyone that we've been training to work in these different phone banks have access to a whole host of resources, everything from how do you apply for unemployment security, as well as where's your local food bank, as well as just listening. And what we found is that people don't just want to have a 1 or 2 minute conversation. They want to have a robust conversation and talk about what's happening and what's happening in this country. And we're using that information to help these folks make a voting plan to be able to turn in their ballot. Because there's so many things that we find by making a voting plan to do that. So really this is a cycle in Washington state where we've had 3 elections. The first being our presidential primary. And the presidential primary was unprecedented in terms of the number of people that we were able to turn out. If you go back to 2016 and think about the number of people that participated in our presidential caucuses, we had about 230,000 people that participated in the presidential caucuses. We had over 2.2 million people participate in the presidential primaries, and more than 1.6 million Democrats who cast their vote in the presidential primary. What that says to us is that Democrats are motivated, they're engaged, they have a distinct preference as to who the president of the United States should be. And it's not the current occupant of the White House. So we're building upon that data and the number of folks that we know who lean towards democratic values, who for some reason haven't been voting or need that extra push to put together a voting plan. It's all about turnout, turnout, turnout. I think is where we need to be to get people out in these different votes. I think that's what's been so incredible about being able to work with your campaign and with you, Rick, early, is to get people turned out in a variety of these different districts and to do the work, as I know you have, with in-person meetings that are socially, appropriate and distant so that you can have those conversations, but also with a lot of different Zoom meetings, talking to folks about what's going on. Your district is incredibly important because of those races that you've mentioned, including your race, and around the state of Washington. But in the 10th district, we have opportunities to pick up seats. In the 42nd, an opportunity to pick up a second House seat. In the 40th, to hold the gains that we've made there. We even have opportunities in the 39th, in the 38th, and so many other places that we really do have a chance to change what happens in the State House and the State Senate in Washington State. I really want to remind folks that we had an incredible year in 2018, and it was all about the fact that the state party, working with our critical partner campaigns like our congressional campaigns, turned out the voters. We were able to up the number of people voting for Democrats in every single county in the state of Washington, anywhere from 6 to 11%. That's fairly astounding. And we have an opportunity to do that again here in 2020. But it's not running on a platform of just, well, we're not Trump. It's running on the things that Democrats do care about and are making a difference in Congress. When you ran in 2018, Rick, I remember one of the things that you said, and Congresswoman Susan DelBene quotes it often, that you've been in the minority, you've been in the majority, and the majority is a lot better.
A lot better.
Yes. And I think we've seen that. And I hope you will talk about what the Democratic majority in Congress has been doing to really make things better for folks with a whole host of different bills. I think it's close to 600 right now, probably even more than that, that are sitting on Mitch McConnell's desk because he's not doing the work in the Senate to make sure that the will of the people is being heard and that America is a country that really is living up to its promise of equality and equity for all. It's one of the things that people are in the streets right now asking for, and I think Democrats are poised to deliver. So in Washington State, in addition to your race, I have an opportunity to make sure that we return Kim Schreier as well. In her first reelection in the 8th congressional district, looking at Carolyn Long, for example, in the 3rd congressional district. Carolyn is back after losing very narrowly to Jamie Herrera Butler, and so many other races as well. And then, of course, in the context of a pandemic, what do we do to make sure that we return Governor Inslee, who's running against 37 opponents and probably the likely person, probably the likely person that he will end up going up against is Tim Eyman.
Oh, heard of him.
Yeah. Yeah, he's probably sitting in that stolen chair right now. But I do want to remind folks how Tim Eyman started, where he started back in 1995 in the initiative business, and it was I-1000. So Tim Eyman's roots as a candidate and in the initiative business is around essentially discriminating against minority-owned businesses, essentially discriminating against the opportunity that so many people have had in this country, but so many others have not. So I think a Trump-Eyman ticket is probably fitting in their own sort of lack of care for people. And I know that this is going to be interesting, and I can't wait to see what kind of Republican opponent you end up getting and how they negotiate that and how they talk about the fact that they've got somebody like Tim Eyman running for governor, or they've got Donald Trump at the top of the ticket. And personally, I don't even know how anyone can say that these are their Republican values and deal with it. So I've got a question for you, actually, though. I can just to meet, which is, how are you dealing with this on a daily basis in Congress? Because I know how difficult it is on the ground to get this work done, to get people engaged, to want them to do the work. How are you dealing with it in Congress and the work that you do every day?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So my staff on the official side is they're all teleworking. So they're working from home. They are all equipped with a laptop so we can be connected. And it's important, I think important to note that the work of Congress continues. We've been having to deal with the fact that we can't be together to work because of the pandemic, COVID-19, but we've also been very successful in helping to shape the COVID-19 legislation that we have passed out of the House and into the Senate and got to the president's desk. Without Democrats in the majority in the House of Representatives, the first CARES package, CARES 1.0, as I call it, that helped with pandemic relief, would not have reflected the support it has for families and for small businesses. The first idea from the Republicans in the Senate was tax cuts for corporations, help for large companies. We were able to reject that. We were able to get a better bill that focused on families and small businesses. And we can do some of that. We can do some of that work remotely, but eventually you have to vote in person, and we've been able to do that as well. But as I've told my staff, we've gone from COVID-19 response to now COVID-19 recovery. That is, what does economic recovery look like? And then to the regular business. All that stuff that was sitting on my desk on January 15th, let's say, is still sitting on my desk, and we need to start moving on that. So in the next couple of days, the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure, where I sit in Congress, is going to have some very big news. And I will tell you what the news is. We're introducing a major, robust, long-term transportation and infrastructure package tomorrow, in fact, and it's about a $500 billion bill. It makes a huge investment in roads, bridges, highways, and transit, and in rural broadband and as well. And I think what's also important is that it includes a major investment in greening up the nation's infrastructure. Mm-hmm. So think about a long-term investment into electric vehicles, a long-term investment into low emission and no emission transit. So we can begin turning the corner in our transit agencies, electric vehicle, and the infrastructure to support EV use around the country. That is finally part of a major transportation investment in this country. So we're getting back to the regular business as well. And the infrastructure recovery will include a major investment in protecting our environment and fighting climate change as well. So I think that's the long answer to your question. How do you deal with this? How do you work on this? The short answer is you make it work. This is the cards. These are the cards we're dealt with, and we need to continue as Democrats to push forward on our progressive values. Because I can guarantee everybody who's listening and watching, the Republicans haven't stopped just because of the pandemic. They haven't stopped pushing what they want to do. So we haven't stopped what we want to do. And that, I will say that will continue into the fall as part of the election.
I think that's so critically important. And at a time when people are thinking about what does the economic recovery look like coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic, everyone is wondering about where are these new jobs going to come from? How do we make some transitions into a whole new set of jobs? And that's incredibly heartening to hear. I think for everyone, the infrastructure components of this and creating these packages is so incredibly important, as well as taking that big bite out of climate change. I think with everyone being at home, we've seen the impact of the planet on the planet, right? Of all of this stuff happening. And I think that that's so critical. And for voters, many voters, younger voters, it's the number one issue that I end up hearing about how all of this works. But sort of getting back to campaign tactics again, too, thinking about what we need to do between now and August. The reality is we need to turn those 1.6 or so million Democrats who voted in the presidential primary in March into 1, 2, 3 million voters in the August primary. That is so critical because we need to set our baseline as well going into these elections, being able to identify voters. And there's one statistic that holds true and that we've looked at over 4 different presidential cycles, so 16 years versus of data that we've taken a look at. And that is, if you vote in our regular August primary in a presidential year, you are 94 to 96% likely to vote in the general election in that presidential year. That means that working to get people to turn in their ballots to make those voter plans is incredibly important, because we can, with some certainty, believe that those people are then going to vote. And so coming then out of that August primary, we can then pivot to the people who vote less frequently, or the new voters, or voters who need some help. For example, they might need a ballot in Spanish, or they might need access to some sort of reader to be able to do their ballot, or they're in certain areas where traditionally voting has not been a part of what they've done on a regular basis. And that's critically important. We're also doing a ton of constituency outreach in various underrepresented voting groups as well. Yeah. I'm proud that we have a Native American organizer who is focused in on our 29 recognized tribes, recognized tribes, and is working with them and put together a voting plan. And obviously he's Native American. His name's Larry Courtier. He's fantastic. And has worked with each of the tribes to make sure that they know who can they register, and putting together a voting plan for folks. And that voice of Native American Washingtonians is so incredibly important. We're doing the same thing in the African American community, the Asian Pacific Islander community, the Latinx community, as well as the LGBTQ community, to make sure that that's an incredible part of the work that we do every day. We have a terrific organizer in your area, Regional Field Director Savannah Steele is running that particular office, and we're excited because Savannah is back from working on the 2018 coordinated campaign. And coordinated campaign is an interesting term because it's something that, for folks who don't know what it is, it's like every 2 years, state parties can actually work with other campaigns and do the thing we normally can't do, which is coordinate, meaning work on our voting efforts together. It means we've got to have somebody at the federal side on the ticket. In this case, in your district, it would be you, somebody statewide, so Governor Inslee, or any of our other terrific candidates, Hillary Franz, Mike Pelliciotti for treasurer, Gail Tarleton for Secretary of State, who we definitely want to have win, and then a variety of others, local candidates, and then we'll feature those in different areas of the district. Normally, those are done via paper, and people are leaving them at people's houses. We will be doing digital versions of these slate cards that will be able to.
How are you going to do that? Because one of my questions I had for you, and thinking about between now and the primary, I presume that we won't be knocking on any doors.
Correct.
It's very likely we won't be doing that. So other than the phone bank and the text bank,
right?
How do you do this doorbell equivalent?
Right.
And leaving something at the door for folks.
You bet. Well,
the metaphorical door. Yeah.
Well, with texting, and we've already sent close to 50,000 texts into certain areas in the state of Washington. We can also add the attachment as well of a digital slate card that goes with that particular voter. We'll also be doing that via email and other ways of getting it out there. We'll also be online, allowing you to share that with all of your friends. So using a relational organizing tool that allows you to basically, with just a couple of clicks, say, send this to all of my friends in these areas. We match them up with a voter file. And then by virtue of doing that, it's got the right ID, the right address, and they will get the right version of the slate card that they need to be able to make their decisions and know who's doing what in those different places. We are also training people like crazy to help on these sorts of things. Every other Saturday, we online training. On the Saturdays, we have several different versions of what happens of that. We were hoping that folks that we want to have you kick off one of those trainings soon, but also anyone who's interested in phone banking for you, we can train them up if they need additional training on these Saturday trainings. And they can go to the Washington State Democrats website to get access to those and sign up. We are training hundreds of people every other weekend to be able to do this work. And I have to say that what's been so exciting for us is the number of people who have responded. Using our predictive dialing tools and these great phone banks, we are calling approximately 10,000 people a night around the state of Washington. So talking to so many people in so many different areas. And this past Sunday, we sort of hit a record with our phone bank in making over 20,000 calls.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
In a couple hours on a Sunday. And it's not one person making 20,000 calls. Verify that. But collectively, we're making those calls. And that's so important to be able to connect with voters and, again, start them on their voting plan and voting journey.
I say, as a member of Congress and therefore as a candidate every 2 years, some nights it feels like I made 20,000 phone calls.
Yeah.
Because I still, I may be one of the few candidates who's elected in Congress, except for all my colleagues in Washington State, who spend as much time making those phone calls, or in the days of doorbelling as much as any volunteer or any paid staffer, because I think it's important that individual members and the candidates get out there themselves and understand that, because it's hard to ask people to make a lot of phone calls, cold calls to people that they don't know, if you're not doing it yourself. And that's why I'll be participating in my own phone banks over the next 3 out of 4 days as well.
And I appreciate that. And what I also appreciate is that you don't take anything for granted and are always out asking people for their vote and for their support. And that's so cool to be able to do that. I think that's what's been great about being able to work with your staff and building the coordinated campaign response around these things, is that it's not just about you, and that's important, but that you're lifting up all of these other campaigns as well and encouraging people to get out there and do this work, whether it's phone banking, text banking, relational organizing, getting trained up, but connecting in community in ways that certainly the pandemic has made difficult, and right now is something that is just, folks are looking for that level of leadership and looking for people who are going to be there. And I appreciate that about what we've been able to do together.
So before we move on, I wanted to have you drill down on a few districts in the North Puget Sound. One is the 10th legislative district,
Yeah.
The seat that the Senate seat that we are seeking to win is a seat that a Republican resigned from, and therefore a Republican was appointed to complete the term. But I think we have one candidate there, Helen Price Johnson, who's a county commissioner in Island County for the Senate seat. And then we have, what do they call that? Just the something of riches, the
Embarrassment of riches, really, of candidates.
embarrassment of riches. Yeah, and in one of in the other seat where it's an open seat, I think we have I think up to 4 Democrats running in the House seat there. But I mean, it is a seat Republicans have held, seats that their Republicans have held. But 2 years ago we won with Dave Paul. Representative Dave Paul won the seat. We came close in the other House seat. This seems to be a district that seems to be turning, if not Democratic, at least independent, and people much more willing to take a look at Democrats than they have in the past.
I think that that's absolutely true. And in many ways, where the 10th legislative district is at this moment is where I think the 5th legislative district was a cycle or two ago. If you go back to 2016, in the 5th legislative district, we had a Democrat.
I'm sorry, Tina, for folks following at home, the 5th legislative district is around Issaquah.
Issaquah area, yes.
The 10th district is Whidbey Island, is about, and some other places, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the 5th was interesting because in 2016, we 2 Republicans were representing in the House side of it, and we only won a Senate seat by literally a couple of hundred votes in that 2016 election. Fast forward to 2018, and those 2 House seats were taken by 2 terrific Democrats, Bill Ramos and Lisa Cowan, who are fantastic candidates. And now here in 2020, Lisa Cowan doesn't even have a Republican opponent.
Wow.
Bill Cowan's opponents are not strong opponents. The state senator that's in there has another Democratic opponent, and the Republican pulled out of the race. So really, it's very interesting to see how that district has evolved. And I feel as though the 10th district is in that place. You have just a superstar in Helen running in the state Senate race. She, as a county commissioner, has been so good and so smart in terms of environmental issues, economic issues, land use issues, all of those things. Helen brings an expertise and an understanding of the 10th legislative district that simply wasn't there in the current, certainly, Republican who's appointed, but even in the previous Republican incumbent. Dave Paul sort of led the way in 2018 in that district, and he's proven himself to that district. And then again, that embarrassment of riches, 4 great Democrats running in that open seat. Any of them would be an upgrade, a major upgrade to the Republican incumbent that had been in that particular seat. And it's exciting to see what's happening. And I think people are looking for real solutions to their issues. And that's what these candidates present. And that's what Democrats, I think, around the state are trying to present is, look, here you've been getting lots of rhetoric from the Republicans in these areas. What you haven't been getting is real solutions that impact you, your jobs, your families, your education, your kids, your grandparents, your ability to just live the kind of life that you want. And that's, I think, what Democrats are bringing to the ticket here in a variety of ways.
Yeah, I don't want to forget the 42nd legislative district. That's up in Whatcom County, a lot of rural Whatcom County. It has a bit of Bellingham, but not a lot of Bellingham. But we did win a House seat there 2 years ago, Sharon Shoemake, and she's running for re-election. Right. And I think we have a one-on-one matchup in the other House seat as well.
You bet. Alicia Rule is the candidate. She is a city council member. She's terrific and smart. And, Sharon in 2018, the professor, she's a professor in economics at Western Washington University. She won her race again narrowly. And Alicia, I think, as a Blaine City Council member, is going to make a terrific difference in that seat as well. And she really does understand the district. She understands the needs of small towns, lots of small towns that are a part of that district, and understanding things like you had mentioned, which is that broadband infrastructure that's so critical for those different areas, for small businesses, as well as educational and healthcare opportunities. I don't know about a lot of the folks who might be watching, but I recently had a hip replacement and I am doing all my follow-up via telemedicine.
Oh, really? Yeah.
That's been interesting to watch, and even doing physical therapy with my physical therapist via telemedicine and making that happen. Luckily, I've got some bandwidth to do that, but
Yeah.
in many parts of the state, we can't. And so that is an important component of our health infrastructure as well moving forward.
Yeah, great. Well, this has been great. I know we have time for other questions as well, and I want to ask Jack if he can maybe help us out with some questions from other folks.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So I'm scrolling through the Facebook comments and I'll pull out one I see here. The question is about jobs. So what are we doing about the high unemployment numbers in the Everett area, specifically with regards to Boeing?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at that first. Thanks, Jack, and thanks for that question. Snohomish County has the highest unemployment rate in the state of any county. It was 20.2%. It's probably higher than that. And in fact, the official rate is probably lower. I'm sorry, is lower than the actual rate in any one of the counties. So the first thing we did through through one of the CARES Act is pass the Payment Protection Program. This was to ensure that we could keep money in people's pockets. This would not have happened the way it did without Democrats in the U.S. House of Representatives fighting for it. But we are using dollars to running those through lenders into into the hands of small business owners, who are then using those dollars to keep their paychecks, keep paychecks for the people that they've hired and have work for them. So that's one thing we're doing. But to get people back to work is going to require that we take care of this public health emergency. The public health emergency has to be addressed first. The economic recovery will follow right in behind it. And so for this pandemic, it is a matter of getting personal protective equipment, or PPE, to hospitals, to transit workers, frontline grocery workers, those women and men that you see every day going to work on your behalf, firefighters, police officers. We need to be sure that everybody who's having any interaction with the public has PPE, and that is a battle we're fighting every day with the administration. But I think Governor Inslee is and his team are doing a good job. The other thing is on testing. We need to continue to test for COVID-19, get the testing numbers up, get a much better idea of where COVID-19 is in the population. That will help us better quarantine individuals who need to be quarantined, instead of having this blanket stay home, stay healthy order. We are moving into a safe start order as the governor has outlined it. But this testing needs to be broadened as well. That will provide more confidence for people to go out, to be out with others, to go out to those restaurants, and to go to the store, to go shopping, to go to the retail stores where we see so many people have been laid off. I think that with regards to Boeing, this is a really difficult circumstance. If airlines aren't flying people around the country or around the world, then those airlines are going to choose not to have airplanes on their books. And they're not going to buy airplanes from the makers, including Boeing. And it's not just Boeing, it's that massive supply chain. Those women and men who work in the supply chain throughout the state. We're going to have layoffs here at Boeing, and it's sad to see that. And I've talked to the union about that and what we can do to help the union make that transition for those women and men who might lose their jobs. But there's a supply chain of people who make the seats, who make the interiors. I was at a small shop today. They employ 3 people, and they sew the cloth for seats on airplanes. And it's 3 people. And a business like that, they lost 90% of their business this year alone because they do seats for airplanes. And we need to be sure we're taking care of the people in the supply chain, from Boeing down to that smallest 3-person shop. And we're looking at ways to help alleviate the pain for those folks as well.
Well, I think it's terrific what you've been talking about in terms of the infrastructure bill that you're releasing, because that is an opportunity for these small shops and other shops as well within that supply chain to be able to move to different sorts of products that they can work on. And I think having that is so critically important. And I can't agree more about the opportunity with PPEs for frontline folks. Talking to our incredible, we have Dan Bernowski, who's a firefighter, a frontline firefighter, running for state representative this year. Dan is very articulate about those needs. Lori Fagan, who's also running for state representative, who's a nurse practitioner, talking about what she sees on a regular basis in that. And then it's just disturbing to see the incompetence from the Trump administration on testing and even getting testing supplies to folks. You know, here in Washington State, there have been commitments for tens of thousands of just testing swabs. And of course, the shipment that they sent were not even testing swabs. They're basically Q-tips thrown into a box. And that's not what you need in terms of being able to get a handle on this pandemic and dealing with it in an effective sort of way. So kudos to all of the efforts that you've been putting together around pushing on the federal government to get us those testing supplies, and then working in concert with our state government to make sure that testing is happening, contact tracing is happening, and that people are looking at different economic opportunities as a result of money going in from the federal government. This is not the last bill you're going to do, I suspect, around something like that.
I hope it isn't. We passed the HEROES Act a few weeks back in the House of Representatives. The Senate is still sitting on it, but that is another major investment into our state and local governments for, because we've seen massive layoffs in government, which means massive layoffs in government services. It's putting a squeeze on local government budgets. And so passing the HEROES Act is important too. So I hope folks will continue to press on the Senate to pass the HEROES Act so we can move on to the next phase of relief. But Jack, do you have another question?
Yes, and that's actually a perfect segue. We've been getting a couple of comments about what to expect for our next package. So you mentioned HEROES, but after that, what might folks expect, particularly around support for families and for workers? One comment here says, we have families barely making it. I work in education and I'm checking on at-risk students. Another package would help them.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of avenues to take on addressing the question of how we can help. So the HEROES Act passed. It's nearly a $3 trillion bill. About $1 trillion of that is for state, local, tribal, and territorial governments to help backfill the loss in tax revenue that they experienced because of the pandemic. And if we can get this passed, it will help stabilize the employment in these government workers, who are the very workers that I think we take for granted sometimes because we don't see the work that they're doing. But without the work that they're doing, much of what we see in our everyday lives wouldn't be working. And so I think it's important that we recognize the need to help state and local, tribal, and territorial governments, because that is directly helping women and men who are providing services throughout our communities. Another aspect of this help, though, has to be on helping employees stay on the job where there is work. And Susan Del Bene, Representative Del Bene, has taken the lead on one particular tool called the Employee Retention Tax Credit. It's not important to go into too much detail about it, but this is one tool an employer can use to help pay for keeping someone on the payroll. And that is a tool I think we're going to see a lot more use of come summertime, when we see a ramp up. We'll see some ramp up of employment, and we'll see some employers pay back or get the grant from the payment protection program, and then they move on to the next tool that they can use. I think two issues I've been working on, though, in particular, maybe address more directly. the vulnerable population. One is on food security. I visited with the Puget Sound Food Hub today in Burlington to look at what they're doing to connect locally grown produce that our farmers are producing right now, bringing that into the food hub, boxing it, and then delivering that to food banks throughout the region. Now, if we weren't able to do this, we would have stories in our own state of farmers throwing away food and produce. But because we have a lot of small farms in our area and a lot of small farm producers and an extensive network of food banks and the food hub, they're able to use one of the tools out of the CARES Act called the Coronavirus Food Assistance Program to connect this food to food banks as one tool, and only one tool, but there are other tools, as one tool to ensure that there's food on the table of many of these vulnerable families. The second thing I want to point out is the digital divide. And Tina mentioned this when it comes to rural broadband, but we saw when the schools were closed, K through 12 were closed, we saw that there was a digital divide, not just between school districts, say not just between Kirkland, and Meridian School District up in Whatcom County, but there's a digital divide within rural school districts and within urban school districts. And we need to be sure that we're closing that digital divide. And so I've led the effort in our state to get some attention to this problem with the Department of Education and the Federal Department of Commerce, so that we can get help to our local school districts. It's not a matter of having a laptop or a Chromebook is what a lot of schools are using. It's a matter of having Wi-Fi, so you can download assignments and upload completed assignments instead of having to drive to your local library to sit in the parking lot to do that. And by the way, thank you libraries for continuing to help on this. And thank you school districts for continuing to help on this. But that digital divide is a real problem in ensuring equal education equal access to education in our state. And that still exists despite the advances that we've made. So that's another issue that at least I've been focused on, along with food security.
And a major thank you to each and every one of our teachers and all the support personnel in K through 12, all the way through higher ed in the state of Washington. I have 3 kids, 2 are out of school, 1 is an 11-year-old. I have never been more grateful for their teachers than I have been during this process, homeschooling and doing that work. It can be very, very difficult. And our teachers just do an immense amount of work, but so do all the support personnel. And just thinking about the equity in the system too for kids who are dealing with learning disabilities, who need extra help, who are trying to work their way through the system. I just want to give a shout out to everybody who's part of WEA, the Washington Education Association, who's been doing this work, and just a reminder of how important it is to have these folks be represented and make sure that from support personnel to teachers, they're getting more than a living wage. They're continuing to get the support that they need to be able to do their work. It has been tough for our kids for sure, but it has been far more tough, I know, for our teachers who have been putting everything that they have into taking care of our kids through this. And since that question came from somebody from who I believe was a teacher, from what Jack had said, I just want to say thank you as well. And thank you on behalf of our family and all the families that miss you desperately right now.
Yeah, Jack.
Great. So one comment we've been getting a couple of times is and I'm paraphrasing, but what can Washington State Democrats and activists do nationally to elect Democrats around the country, both to take back the White House and also to flip the United States Senate?
Sure. Well, one thing is to keep doing what you're doing in terms of getting trained and working with Washington State Democrats. As a state party for the last 2 years, we've been working with 4 very critical battleground states: Minnesota, Wisconsin, Ohio, and Michigan. All the things that we do, from campaign techniques and tools, we test out here in Washington State. And if they're successful, we ship it over to those 4 states to be able to utilize in their different kinds of races. So know that there's a partnership that's happening there in those different races to work on that from a state party perspective. So get yourself trained and do that work and help us out with that, because it's having that particular benefit to do that. Rick, do you want to talk about sort of other races or the national scene, particularly in the Senate and the House? Because boy, we need that Senate majority too, but we keep that House majority as well.
Yeah, let me, there are a lot of races I could focus on. Keep in mind, I think we elected 43 new freshmen 2 years ago. Now, some of those freshmen won't need any help because they won seats that were good Democratic seats. But the only reason we have a majority is because we had Democrats win in very difficult seats. I can think of Xochitl Torres Small in New Mexico, Kendra Horn in Oklahoma. Yes, we have a House member in Oklahoma, people, and she won, and we need to bring Kendra Horn back. I can think of 2 seats in Virginia, if not 3 seats in the state of Virginia, in Southern Virginia. I can go, the list is very long. We don't keep the majority unless we keep those folks who help make the majority. And they are doing a great job, not just as candidates for running for re-election, but they represent their districts very well. They probably wouldn't know much about how to represent, say, the 8th district in Washington State. But I don't want Kendra Horn to know how to represent a district that I know. I want her to know how to represent the district that she lives in and knows. And we need to support people like Kendra Horn and these other folks who help create the majority. Then you go to the Senate, where we're down 3, and I can name Arizona, Montana, Colorado, Iowa, Maine, North Carolina, Georgia, perhaps. I might be missing 1 or 2, but that's 7 seats that we're going to play hard in the U.S. Senate. And then there's that 1 seat located in Washington, D.C. It's held by that one guy. Yeah, we want that one too. But here's the thing. A lot of people are going to make a lot of predictions, and predictions only count after the action that they predicted, especially in politics. So don't get complacent. The only thing that wins races is shoe leather or virtual shoe leather. It's making those phone calls, it's supporting your candidates. And that's the only thing that helps win. Predictions don't do much of anything. We need to, we're beyond the debate society portion of the show. We are on to the action portion of the campaigns right now, all over the country. And you can be a part of it. Tina mentioned not only what we're doing here, but we're doing virtual phone banks. Well, because they're virtual, you can do a virtual phone bank in a Virginia seat if you want. You just be sure that you remember it's a 3-hour time difference. So don't call it 7 p.m. West Coast time.
Yeah.
But if you want to get involved in a race that's out of the state, you can Tina, can they contact you, or should we send them to the national party to get some information on how to do that?
Absolutely. If you're interested, obviously we want you calling into as part of Rick's district. We want you to
do your job in our state first.
Here, help us in the state, because do you know that there's lots of opportunities in other places, and Rick certainly has mentioned the opportunities in these different Senate races to call in and do this work. So yeah, connect with us at the state party, get trained with us at the state party. We'll make sure that we slot you into a phone bank for Congressional District 2 right here in Washington State, or any of the other 10 districts that we have here in Washington State. And then you'll be ready to go in these other states as well and have those kinds of opportunities. I think it's pretty exciting to think about holding the House, getting the Senate, and then being able to have the seat at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, and starting a new day and putting to rest this sort of 4-year national nightmare that we've had under Trump.
Yeah, indeed. Well, I think we're near the end. Tina, did you want to take a few minutes to kind of wrap, and then I'll wrap after that, maybe?
Sure. Thank you so much. Well, I want to thank Congressman Rick Larsen for doing this, for getting out here and talking to folks. I appreciate everything that you're doing within your district. not just to elevate your own campaign, but to elevate the campaigns of so many people running for these legislative district seats, and the work that you did in the last cycle, and I think we'll continue to do when we move from an even year cycle to an odd year cycle in all of these local elections as well. I mean, it's been pretty exciting to see the changes that we've made in city councils, in county councils, in county executive seats, in judicial seats, and all of these places throughout the district. So I just want to say thank you. We need you now more than ever, and you can plug in a lot of different places. So for folks that are watching, you can go to our website. It's wa-democrats.org. You can connect in through Rick's campaign website. We're more than happy to help you get slotted in, but now is the time to do something. And honestly, it couldn't be easier than to do it from your home when you can, or to do it from your phone when you can, because there's opportunities that are part of that too. So I just want to say thank you so much, Rick, for this opportunity to talk about the coordinated campaign and our work. And thank you for everything you do for all your constituents in Congressional District 2 and for everyone in the state of Washington.
Tina, thanks for your leadership of the state party. 2018 was a great year, and I know what we need to do to outdo 2018, and you're the leader for that, and I really appreciate the time you gave us tonight to help out with my campaign as we start this week with our virtual phone bank. By the way, folks, this background I selected is, I'm not out in the middle of the Skagit Valley doing this call, but I have a variety of pictures from throughout the district that I'm featuring when I do these calls, because I like to show off how beautiful my district is, and I enjoy my district. And I also, you don't need to see my house. It's a mess. So I will say, I'm going to turn it over to Jack to wrap up, but you can encourage, you can help us out by adding your name to the list of groups and individuals who've endorsed my campaign. And you can go to ricklarson.org to do that. I would very much appreciate the endorsement of folks who are on. You can host a virtual house party. I did one for Helen Price Johnson running for the Senate. There were about 53 folks who showed up for that, and we want to do the same for my campaign. It worked out really well. It was we used Zoom, and it worked out really well for her. Submit a letter to the editor about any issues supporting me, or about any issues. I think it's important that Democrats engage in the public conversation on the issues that are important, including, of course, the issue of racial justice and criminal justice reform, and the goals that we want to achieve in a partnership with the folks who are out there protesting on behalf of George Floyd and the family. Sign up for email alerts at ricklarson.org. Follow me at Facebook and Twitter. Hey, put up a yard sign from a past campaign. We're getting yard signs out fairly soon, but if you got one in the garage, it's time to put those up. I know my mom did. She has one in her garage and her carport, and it went up last night. So you can do that as well. You can also contact Jack at ricklarson.org for a yard sign. And of course, learn more about the coordinated campaign at wa-democrats.org. Tina and her team are doing a great job there. We need to support candidates throughout the state. So with that, thank you all very much. I'll turn it back over to Jack for the final close. Jack?
Yeah, thank you, Rick, and thank you, Tina, for being on this call this evening, and for everybody watching. Just to reiterate, please feel free to reach out to me at jack@ricklarson.org, and there's some comments in the comment section with some more information on how to be connected. And with that, I will wish everybody a good night, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks a lot, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.